And this is by choice. If you don't want me to record, let me know or go off camera. I promised that we would get something with Ted's face and voice on YouTube for some folks. So Ted went to Burning Man. Ted is a CTC, a fellow CTC, and just a darn nice guy. He's written a few books. His father is here tonight, Keith Wallace. Wave your hand, Mr. Wallace. And if you haven't met him, apparently smart runs in the family. Ted's pretty dynamic and he's got a great message for tonight. Take it, Ted.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. And I'll share my screen. Let's do that. So can everybody see my screen now? Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So the title is Neurohacks, Cynefin, and Burning Man: Using the Right Tools to Amplify Intelligence and Solve Hard Problems. And it's a very experiential talk. And I will just dive into it. It is a great honor to have my dad here with me. He's in terms of a lot of the books and a lot of the neurohacks type of information. I've got to work on that with him. And let's see. So I think if you can enter in the chat your name, where you're at right now, and what your favorite hack or shortcut for improving learning, that would be amazing. Just to get to, I know a lot of people here, but it'd be fun to just kind of see where people are at and any kind of things that you do to improve your learning. Ooh, nice. Lead with curiosity, repetition, mnemonics, note-taking, visuals, selective attention, record new learnings as soon as possible. Okay, cool. Those are great ones. Those are good ways of kind of getting those patterns in your brain set up. And we'll talk a little bit about setting patterns in your brains and breaking patterns in your brains. Those are some of the subjects we'll get into. I'll lead off with just kind of some the agenda. So just as we did the intros and questions, a bit about the journey to set the context for the story, and a little bit about neurohacking, a little bit about Cynefin, a little bit about Burning Man, and then sort of bringing that all together to kind of talk about the experience that I had there. And then we'll do questions and answers afterwards. And if you want to jump in with questions, I will monitor the chat. Does the chat show up on the video when I have it up, or is it invisible?
Ted, it's been so long since I recorded myself coaching.
No, it's there.
Is it? Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
I couldn't remember.
I don't think it shows up in the recording, no.
Okay, cool. So I'll just leave it up then. All right. So in terms of my journey, this has a few parts to it. The bottom part is sort of my Agile journey in terms of getting involved in Agile, being a Scrum Master, getting my CSP in 2014. And then at that time, I remember I was fortunate to have Pete Behrens as a mentor, and he was just starting the CTC. And so I tried to do that. And that I needed to have a lot more experience at that point to get that. And I started thinking, it's actually hard to change people's habits. That's kind of where I was got to as a CSM and a CSP and as a Scrum Master, and starting to work with other Scrum Masters. We were trying to change how this company did things, our speed of learning, the habits that people had in terms of, say, how they built software, how they deployed software. And it was difficult. It wasn't, we did have Scrum teams going, we had all that working, but people were still going back to doing things the way they had always done things. Luckily, my dad is a top scientist in meditation and neuroscience. And so I got to start working with him, and we spent a couple years together talking. I presented different materials, and we came up with total brain coaching, which was a system for helping people change their habits. It included not only the brain, changing that and what things you could do to shorten that, but also the gut and kind of a whole body solution. So that was there. And then we wrote a number of books on this, and we did a number of courses on it. We got a lot of information back and forth. And I think every conference that I went to after that, I would present either at open space or at one of the talk slots and get feedback. And then we'd be testing. At the company I was at, Cambridge, I'd be testing some of these things. And then I went on to principal and have been testing some of these different things. So we'd be testing in a classroom situation. Dad, my father also runs an integrative medicine program with 600 students. So he's integrated a lot of that into some of that integrative medicine. So that's kind of the life and wellness coaching. The Agile Changemaker is the group that I joined in 2016 that a number of you are part of, and that really helped me in my whole CTC journey. So that's kind of a little bit about how I got into neurohacks and habit change, and also kind of my Agile journey. And these days I'm working at Principal trying to change departments or what we call vertical slices. So in a product, either a product family or a group of products, we're trying to limit our scope and create environments which are conducive for habit change. The top version is kind of my Burning Man journey. And basically when COVID hit, one of the members of our group in Agile Changemakers was Michael Della Mazza. And he had told me a year before, you should check out virtual reality and see what coaching's like in virtual reality. So I had been doing that for about a year and a half. And I was able to do some of that during COVID. It wasn't like a super rewarding experience. There were some fun parts to it. But because I was in that world when the Burning Man organization decided to do their virtual Burning Man, I was kind of in that space, and I wanted to see what they would offer. And I had a pretty amazing experience, much more amazing than any other virtual event that I had attended or that I had put on myself. And so I got involved in the organization to they have a number of principles that we'll talk about, but one is one that allows everyone to be included in it. And of course, they have this thing in the desert, so it excludes tons of people. So by having it virtual, that would open up to people who, say, with mobility issues and things like that. So that was the reason why I got into it and volunteered in their organization. And they basically said, hey, you know, it's great that you worked on it for 2 years in a virtual sense, but now that we're having the real thing, you need to come to that to experience it, to have any kind of credibility in this organization, to be honest. And so I went, and it was a great experience. And I went by myself the first time. And then this last year, I was able to bring my sister and my son with me. And it was at this last event where I'd been thinking a lot about neurohacks and a lot about Cynefin, and I could see a lot of that happening in that environment. So that's a little bit of a kind of setting the stage for this presentation. Let's see. So one of the things that I feel, and I'd love to hear what everyone has to say, either in the chat or speaking out, like one of the ways that I feel as an Agile coach or a product coach or technical coach, how I provide value to the companies that I work with is that they learn faster. That's kind of the ultimate goal. The feedback loops become smaller, they're able to adapt quicker, and they're able to then outperform their competition. And there's sort of a thought process I have, companies learn faster when the departments or product groups, however you're dividing the company, they learn faster. Those learn faster when the teams learn faster, and the teams learn faster when the individuals learn faster. And that last piece, I know usually as a Scrum Master and as a coach, we don't get into so much of individuals learning faster, but I have been able to use some of these methods and these different books that we do, or just getting people, getting people on better, because they end up trusting me and stuff like that, helping them get on better sleep schedules, eating, starting meditation, using yoga. And I've seen that this works out. They become better team members. They're able to change quicker. The teams are able to change quicker. The reason why I have the arrows back and forth with the two different ends is because if you have a great team, it can pull the individuals up. So it's not just, you have to have the individuals that can change quickly and be agile, and then that'll create the teams, and that'll create the departments, that'll create the company. There's a lot of different mechanics. Like the company, if it's got great leadership, it can pull everybody along. Or if a department has particularly good leadership, it can pull everybody along. Or if a team has great leadership. But all of these pieces play into what we do. And a lot of the great success stories in Agile I've seen, they usually have various pieces of this, places where I have a great mentor, Pat Reed, and she's seen some pretty impressive things happen. Elena's seen some pretty impressive things happen, and I'm sure many of you have had some great successes, but usually there's a play between these different elements that happens, and that's quite an interesting story. So the reason why I'm focused on neurohacks for individuals is because it can play a part in the puzzle. Again, it's not always something that I focus on. It's only when there's an openness to it, but I have seen some amplification of learning happening through that. So just to kind of get that neurohacking term out, because it's always a funny term, neurohacking is the art and science of upgrading our mind, brain, and body for more optimal conscious experiences and capabilities. So it's doing things to kind of help our nervous system, help our body perform at a higher level. And that can be in terms of memorization. Some of you had different sort of learning neural hacks like repetition, re-looking at things quickly, notes, all those kind of things. Those are all good neural hacks. Some of the time-tested ones, one of the best ones is like getting up. If you do get up early in the morning and you can get that early morning sun, that's always for a couple minutes, that has lots of good effects. Meditation, my dad's done many studies, hundreds of studies showing that it can help improve many things. Diet, behavioral codes, exercise, sleep. Those are all kind of ones that probably people would know. Yes, that could be if your daughter's into it. If she's not, again, that would be a thing that could actually increase intelligence. That's a good point. Probably doing it with you too is also.
Oh yeah, we're doing it together. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so that may be part of the puzzle too, actually. So neuroplasticity, you probably heard this, and this can be a little bit of a daunting slide, but the idea is that your experience changes the pathways in the brain. So we all have neuroplasticity. A lot of times they used to think like by the time you were 25, it slowed down, and that there are studies that show that it kind of slows down at that point. But I've heard that there are also studies that show like when you're in your 50s, it also starts to hit again. And a lot of times people are saying that's because a lot of times between 25 and 50, you're dealing with your families, your life. You're not experiencing a lot of new things. You're trying to keep a routine. You're trying to keep some level of sanity, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of times neuroplasticity has to do with having different experiences and having repeated of those experiences. It's those experiences that you have that change the pathways in your brain. And the work that my dad and I, have done, we've been looking at how to neurohack the learning cycle, because that would have lots of good well, benefits in terms of agile transformations, if we want to throw out a term like that, or even any kind of when you're trying to transform a company from working in one state to working in a different state. And the kind of key points, we won't get deep into that, but the key points are, the people need to be motivated. You need to personalize the learning. We have ways of doing it in our books, depending on people's bodies types. But there's lots of different ways to personalize it, to make it. Some people are much more visual learners. Figuring out all those pieces is a way you optimize the learning cycle. Then they need to experiment, and then people need to be real. That's how we say it. It's one of those things where you need people who really want to do this thing, not because somebody's telling them to do this thing. Obviously, there's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, and all those kind of pieces play a piece. So that's something that I've been studying quite a bit, and Dad just released another book on neurohacks for learning. So that's actually what the picture wasn't even on this. And so going into Burning Man, I was thinking about this stuff. I just read his book, and it had a lot of the things that we had been working on. And then the other piece of the puzzle, is this, also in neurohacks, kind of where you learn the most is usually in that learning zone or growth zone. So this is a model, and there are lots of different models. I just picked this one out. This is not the end all or be all of any of these kind of learning zones or growth zones, but it just kind of conveys the idea that if you stay in your comfort zone, which people like to do, then the learning's not nearly as optimal. If you go kind of push the edge a little bit, if you're a little bit uncomfortable, we always talk about being comfortable in the uncomfortable, and that's where that learning zone is. And then if you push too much and you put people in a place where it's overwhelming, then of course that doesn't do it. So you have to, it's a delicate game. It's a delicate place, and people are best at self-regulating that zone. So I find when you ask people like, so are you on the edge a little bit? Are you learning at a high level, or are you in that kind of comforty space? That can be useful in terms of figuring out where people, if they're in that kind of growth zone and learning zone. Though that part will definitely play into Burning Man a little bit. So this is a neuroadaptability quiz. I'd love if everybody would take it if they want to. And this is something my dad and I worked out on and published a paper on in Modern Medicine, and sorry, it's at the bottom here, but it's covered up. Medicina, this was in 2021. This is talking about neuroadaptability. So neuroplasticity is the idea that the brain can change, and by having experiences and reinforcing those experiences, you can actually change the way your brain is set up. Neuroadaptability is this idea that when you come into a stressful situation, you respond to it, and then you come back to a baseline very quickly. So it means that you respond to stress, and then you come back to baseline. And that is very useful in terms of dealing with complex situation or chaotic situations. It's useful in daily life, because stress, can be useful in terms of getting you out of a dangerous situation or helping you change things. But if you're too stressed, then it also gets you out of that learning zone. It takes you out of your ability to perform at a high level. So keep these scores to yourself. I actually looked at this before I went to Burning Man, and I looked at my scores after I went to Burning Man. There was definitely an increase in my neuroadaptability, and some of these questions will give you kind of hints of what at least my experience was there. Definitely number one, and a bunch of these, as I said, you'll do it for yourself, and then you'll see how it kind of plays through. Has everybody been able to do that and get a score? And this is not something that we wouldn't compare scores what you would do is you would use this and then you do something to improve your neuroadaptability, or you do something at that level. You'd have some experience, you go traveling, or you do that and you'd see like, hey, did that change my neuroadaptability? Did I become more neuroadaptive due to that experience? Or if you learned some meditation practice, or if you took on a new diet, or if you changed your sleep patterns. Those are all things that could help you improve your ability to handle stress. I'm going to go to the next slide. Does anyone want me to hold for a little longer? You can just speak up.
I took a snapshot so I could listen to what you were saying instead of focusing on the quiz.
Okay, great. That's good. It's just a fun thing to kind of show you what we're talking about, what type of things might improve that neuroadaptability. All right, so that is kind of a little bit about neurohacks, and we talked about neuroplasticity and neuroadaptability. And now we're going to jump into one of these neurohacking. Oh, we're still going to stay on this, and we're going to talk about neurohacking at Burning Man. So this, my son and I went into this thing, and there were lots of pictures of cows that are in that little house. And there were about 5 or 6 other people who were sitting. It's actually a nice little cottage. It's like a little English cottage inside of that giant thing that they built in the desert. And it was at night, and we kind of looked around at all the cows, and we started mooing as a group. So it's a strange sort of thing, but it was definitely a novelty experience that I had never experienced before. And it definitely, so the idea is that if these type of new experience, doing things or interacting with people in ways that you hadn't before, as long as it's obviously within boundaries, that can increase the dopamine levels and create new pathways in your brain. So that would be one way that neurohacking at Burning Man. So staying out of your challenging comfort zones. Last year I went and it was 105 and incredibly dusty. They have these very major dust storms. And so it wasn't the easiest one. It was very challenging conditions, but I felt very exhilarated. You have to bring all of your own stuff in, and as we'll get into Burning Man more, the whole idea is that you leave no trace. So 80,000 people come in and create a city, and then a month later, there's no trace that these people were ever there. So, and everybody has to bring their, hopefully they bring enough water, that would be key, and other things to kind of deal with this environment. There's nothing that lives out there. There's very few insects. It's very rare that you'll see crows or even a lizard. It's a big alkaline riverbed that's dried up, that's at about 4,000 or 5,000 feet. So that's one of the other kind of neurohacks. Oh yeah, fairy shrimp live there. That's true. That's so deep within the ground. There are these these creatures, which I don't even know exactly what they are, but they were enlivened by the rain that came. And so that was a new experience for many people, even who had been there many, many, many times. Mindfulness and presence. So like there are lots of spaces. Immediacy is one of the values of Burning Man. And they create these incredible places. Like this is the temple that they created. It was the inside of the temple. I actually did a lot of meditations there during the 8-9 days that I was there. A lot of people go there to release, to kind of honor the people that have passed in their lives and release those kind of pains inside of them. It creates a very amazing space for people to come at peace with a lot of different issues and the loss of people in their lives. So there are a lot of spaces in Burning Man for that, and that's very useful in terms of as a neurohack for neuroadaptability. And then just the art and creativity. I think my sister said it, like you can't see this any other place on earth in this way. And so the art installations that people do there are mind-blowing, and when usually in a good way. So when your mind is being blown in a good way, that sounded awkward, I apologize. When your mind is not sort of, when it's never seen this thing before and it sees it, it can help create these new neural connections and things like that. So just the idea that you can't see any of this in other parts of the world in this environment helps with it's a neurohack for learning and neuroadaptability and neuroplasticity. All right. So now we're getting to the second part, which is the Cynefin framework. And this is a framework. I don't know, probably most of you are familiar with this. And probably most of you have a much deeper understanding than I have. I've been studying it for a while, and I use it with leaders for situational spaces so that they can kind of figure out what situation they're in. We'll look at it in a minute, and that hopefully will make sense if you're not familiar with it. It was created in 1999 by David Snowden when he worked for IBM Global Services. It's been described as a sense-making device, and Cynefin is a Welsh word for habitat. So that's a little bit about the Cynefin framework. What it looks like is this is one of the later versions of it. It's been around for quite some years, probably 15, 20 years, I think, at least. And some of the names have changed, but when you look at it, it looks like, you have these different quadrants, these 4 different, they're not quadrants, they're sort of habitats, and there's actually a 5th one in the center. And what it sort of represents is when you come to a situation, if you don't know what to do, that's sort of the center, the AC part. When you have no idea what to do, you're like a deer in headlights. And normally you want to move out of that situation, especially if it's a dangerous situation. So you can, if you have no effective constraints, meaning it's a novel situation, you've never been in it before, say like COVID. When COVID hit, the company that I was in immediately didn't know what to do, and its leadership decided, hey, everybody go home at this point. And I think the government did a similar type of thing. So that's it. You needed to, in this situation, act, sense, and then respond to what's going on. And that's, sometimes people feel like a lot of leaders, when they get to new situations, a lot of times they take leadership by acting in that way. That has some good use, but there's also ways of dealing with, say, complex situations. So something like building an iPhone would be a complex situation, especially when Steve Jobs was doing it in the beginning. It's something that hasn't been done before. So chaotic and complex, the things on my left are unknown. So these are places that are more unknown. They are not things that people have done before that much, or the situation that you're in is novel, or you have to actually exactive, which you basically, that situation, it's beyond the boundaries of what you know. And in the complex space is a lot of times where people say Agile lives. It gives you the tools to be able to handle problems that are things that you don't really know. Maybe they're things you've done before, but in terms of the people, the process, the timing, there's a lot of different factors that makes it contextually unique in its own space. And Agile tends to be, those types of frameworks tend to be better at dealing with those types of problems. Now, Cynefin's come up with, David Snowden's come up with his own tools, which are amazing in their own right. But what I'm familiar with is more of the Agile tools and things. Complicated is more like, I would say more like waterfall-ish. It's like building a house. So it's something that people have done a million times before. You usually have to bring in experts. You usually have to plan it well. You can see a lot of benefit of doing things in that way. And a lot of companies that I've worked for are really good at using complicated tools, and they try to apply that to, say, complex situations, sorry. And a lot of times when you say apply waterfall to something that needs an agile framework, it's like, and that's what the picture is on the side, it's like putting a screw in with a hammer. You can do it, but it's not the most elegant way, and there's a lot of collateral damage. So this is just me. This is how I'm looking at this. The clear is usually like best practices and things like that. So again, I usually work with leaders, and I get them to see that, the tools that they use. So if they're really good at solving complicated problems and they're trying to apply that to a complex situation, then it's not always the best fit. And if they train their groups in using some more of these complex tools, then that can have lots of benefits. And usually I have test cases, or we find places in their lives or their work lives where they've seen some of these different tools play out in different situations. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because when we talk about Burning Man and the rain coming, it created a situation where there was both the organization of Burning Man responded in both using chaotic tools. So they took some actions and told people not to leave, and they closed the gates, and they set up radio towers later. But as you'll see when we get into Burning Man, it's made up of 1,500 camps approximately, and each of those camps use a lot of kind of team-based tools to solve problems, and they're quite good at it. So there was an interplay, and this was one of the, I'll hit on it again at the end, but what I saw was, like, these bigger situations, it's not just a one-dimensional type of thing. It turns out all of these different quadrants can be in play at once, and it was really clear in that Burning Man situation that the chaotic quadrant and the tools that were being used for that, theme camps, yeah, perfect, thanks, Rob. And then the camps themselves were handling some of the complexity, and that was different for me, because I had always, when I talked to leaders, I'd always said, well, and obviously I have done some of the courses in Cynefin and things like that, but it was a different vision for me to be able to see that you could use multiple tool sets on the same problem, but it's all about doing it at the right time in the right place with the right people. So this was what happened there. The rain came and the mud got very thick at Burning Man. And that, in terms of what the organization did, using some of those kind of more action-oriented tools and say what I would consider the chaotic space, they said, look, you don't want to leave. You have to stay. They closed the gate. They did the things. There were people that panicked, not very many, and decided to go, and then ended up getting stuck, which was good examples for most of the other people. So this was the camps. These were theme camps. And when they did respond, they kind of created their own tools to handle the mud. Like if you look at people's feet, they sort of plastic bags were used. There were different types of activities. You didn't have all the normal activities that you would go out onto the playa and see the art. It became a much more camp-based. There was a lot of singing. There was a lot of cooking together. It became a much more community-based experience for those 3 days, which had a lot of richness for a lot of people that were there, including myself. So we can go into the last part of this, which is Burning Man. Are there any questions or any comments or anything before I kind of go into just a little bit about what Burning Man is and then how all of this stuff came together for me? Okay, good. All right, so Burning Man, just for those who, and there are people here who've probably been to it and know it. I should have asked that in the beginning. That would have been fun too. So it's a large, week-long, large-scale desert event focused on community art, self-expression, self-reliance. It's in Nevada, in the desert, as I talked about, on this alkaline lake bed that You do have to wipe your feet down with, say, witch hazel every night, because that stuff can do some damage to your skin. There's usually like approximately 75,000 this time. They get up to 80,000. It's a big city. I mean, 80,000 is not small. That's one of the most intense things when you first go there, is just the scale of how big it is. They have 10 principles. I got some numbers from 2019. They didn't have it for the later years, but the number of theme camps is 15,045. Number of mutant vehicles, 632. Number of placed art is 415. So that gives you, we'll look at each of those to give examples of what those are, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. That's what it looks like from an aerial view. And so each of those theme camps would be one of the corners on these blocks. So it's made up of 1,000. And these theme camps, all, the people there, a lot of them have done this for a long time. They know how to, they're self-empowered teams, I would say, and having had the experience of being with them. So you have a city made up of 1,500 self-empowered teams. And they are basically giving stuff. This whole week is about giving. We'll look at some of the principles. Well, these are the people. The people are the best. That's me and my son, and that's my sister. So that was the people I took to it. These are the principles that they go by, and it turns out I'll invoke Pat Reed, who's quite a amazing person who I've had the ability to work with and learn from. She and I think Jim Hightower, maybe I'm not saying his last name right. He was one of the signers also of the Agile Men. They called the kind of leadership group, called them in early on to kind of help them create something that would last for a long time. And I think it was like 204 or something when Larry Harvey was still with us and all that. He's one of the founders of Burning Man. And they came up with these 10 principles. So radical inclusion, that's the principle that I was most focused on, is not just including all the people in the 80,000 people, but the whole world. Gifting is a principle where they don't, that kind of goes with decommodification. They don't have money at Burning Man at all. The only time you use money is to buy ice. That's the one time would you use money, but people give, there's a lot of people come with lots of gifts. We came with animal crackers. That was the gift that I brought, because it went with the theme of this year, was called Animalia. So a lot of the artwork had animal type themes and stuff. People make incredible things like necklaces, or they make food, or there's just no end to what the gifting piece is. There's another principle, radical self-reliance. That's, everybody should be able to take care of themselves. And it's an interesting principle that really played out. Obviously, when the rain came, you wanted everyone to have radical self-reliance, that they had enough water. If their tank got flooded, they had some things, but it kind of played well with the communal effort principle. So the people who weren't as radically self-reliant, the community took care of them on many levels. Decommodification, they're trying to not deal with money as much. And also, you don't see name brand things. People will put tape over some of the name brand stuff, or people aren't wearing name brand clothes or things like that. It's not on that level, and they don't allow people to come in and advertise or things like that. Radical self-expression, I think that's probably what Burning Man is most famous for, people wearing amazing costumes or not much costumes or all that kind of stuff. Communal effort, civic responsibility, leaving no trace. We talked about, the playa, they call it the playa, this desert is, they try to leave it as immaculate as they found it when they get there. Participation and immediacy. So people do have, you don't have cell service out there except for the days when they put up the tower. So they try to be the idea is to be where you are and experience it in kind of just its immediate space. Those are the principles. Any questions on those or any thoughts? There are people probably that have experience with this. They want to talk about it too. That'd be awesome. Yeah, it is amazing how brief these are. Thank you, Olaf. That was not lost to me. they are, and everybody, like, people who are there know these and use them, and those principles were used in these kind of emergency situations. Yeah, a lot of iteration to get it succinct. Good call. So this gives you an idea of the camps. Remember, we said there's like 1,500 camps approximately. The one up in the corners, the Thunderdome, that's a very sort of, that Mad Max moment where you have two people battling. It's an entertainment camp, obviously, but there's some therapeutic parts to it, I would say. My son enjoyed that one and was up at the top watching, and it was, they have two people kind of coming at with sort of wiffle bats and whatnot. And it's a scene. The camp in the bottom, that's actually the camp I was part of, Grateful Floyd. We showed a movie. We all do volunteer work. So volunteerism was a big part of our camp. We also had a bunch of crafting events where we helped people make medallions and things like that. So we had a number of, we were a pretty small camp, but people liked the activities we put on. And then you have somebody like the Love and Oven who were critical. They served focaccia, so you could walk in your muddy boots and get some warm bread, which was a huge thing in the middle of when it's raining for 3 days. So these are just some examples of the type of camps that we're talking about. And all of them are self-contained. They have to set everything up, they have to take everything down, and they're graded or rated on how clean they leave it. And of course, if you're a camp that doesn't leave it very clean, you're not invited back. So that's some of the ways the organization helps with that. The mutant cars, these are some of the more fantastical photos that you'll see from Burning Man. These are, again, people build these for the community. There's no monetary, people drop millions of dollars into some of these cars, and they're doing it not because they're getting paid anything at this festival. They're doing it to give back to the community. The one up in the corner, the upper corner, is called Fluffy. That's one that my sister, myself, and my son got a ride on. It's kind of got more of that Japanese wave, a lot of music and some fire. The one in the bottom corner is this, I can't say it properly, the name of it begins with a P, but it's like this octopus and lots of fire, and it's quite impressive. You'll see lots of photos around that. And the dragon, this was this year, that was the car that impressed me the most this year. Those wings, you can't really see it in this picture, but they're like LCD screens and all sorts of crazy stuff is showing on that. And it's very mobile, so it can, open up quite impressively. And it was quite amazing, I have to say. So there would be about 500 of these cars during that week. Some of them are huge, like whales, they're basically a bus with a giant whale form on it. Some of them are like ships, as big as ships. So, and then some of them are quite small, like a Aladdin shoe. There was an Aladdin shoe that was driving around. The art is some of the most amazing things there too. This was, so again, these people, they do get some money from the foundation. So a lot of the ticket money goes back into building things as elaborate as this. Part of the amazing thing about it is this only lives for like 7 days, because at the end they burn it. And that temple was just, it's all kind of printed out on this special paper, all these incredible images. So it's a plywood type of, it's the Chapel of Babel. And we got caught in there, my sister and my son and I, during one of these dust storms that comes up. That's why you see people with the goggles and the mask, because it's actually quite practical, because the dust storms are pretty intense. But we were caught in there, and it was just magic, because there's an infinite amount of detail within this thing. Like there are literally, I would say, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of photos to build this whole structure. And then, of course, the idea is that, once it's the act of creation, and then they just burn the thing, and then there's a new palette to create something new. This was one of the more interesting ones. It seems rather simple compared to some of the others, but people who swing on the swing, that powers the butterfly. And of course, there's some music going on. And so it's an interactive, there's a lot of interaction. I was on a spider web with my son, and when you move the spider web, there was a lot of graphics that happened. So there's a lot of these art pieces are interactive, and that's a big part of it, that they want people to interact with the art. So this is a story. When we first got here, my son looked at this and immediately said, "Oh, I'm going to go to the top," and I'd taken my son to Burning Man, so I couldn't be like, "Oh no, you can't go." That would be wrong. But it's really dangerous on certain levels. They sometimes say safety's third. As a dad, it looks really dangerous. I'll go with that. And so my son goes zooming up to the top, and at the top, they're up there and they're like, "Oh, I'm really scared. I'm having a panic attack." And I'm looking around for some way to get them down. I'm thinking, like, this is our first moment at Burning Man. And so finally I find a way. I tell them where to come down, but they're freezing up there. So I go up, because I'm like, oh my God, I got to go do this. By the time I get up there, they have somehow gotten to the bottom. Somebody said, "Hey, just follow me." So I'm up there, and I look down, and they're like, "What are you doing up there?" And I said, "I'm scared," and like, I did find my way down after about 10 minutes. But it is those type of experiences. This is a cube, by the way, of these water, as somebody's pointed out, as Rob's pointed out, thank you so much, of water tanks, and there's lights rolling through it, and there's a DJ inside of this, and there's a whole kind of party going on within this cube. So these are type of experiences that you probably aren't going to have, say, every day. Like, that's not normally what I would do. It's not just giant art. There's lots of smaller, medium-sized pieces. There's paintings, there's metal work, there's comic book art, there's people art. People are art at this place. So these are all things that you won't see like, I don't normally see. Maybe I'm not living in places where I just don't see this stuff. So again, it enlivens all these new pathways. It helps me look at the world in a way that I would never look at it. So that's a bit about Burning Man. And for me, kind of the most magical part of this is they do, like they create this space called the temple. This is called the Temple of the Heart. And again, as I mentioned, this is a place that I went to and meditated a lot. And my son had an experience where they thought they were going to write about certain people in our lives, family members who had passed, which we did. But they wrote about a classmate who unfortunately had taken their own life. And there was a lot of tears. There was a lot of release of emotion. And they kind of turned to me and said, if I hadn't released this here, I'd be carrying this for years and years with me. So this space of these 80,000 people and these 1,500 camps and this organization can create these magical kind of spaces. That's the level of things that can be created within this space. But when it rains for 3 days, it all comes to a crashing halt. And we ended up in a space that hadn't happened before. It hadn't rained that much on the main 3 days. So it had rained before. There had been other times when the rain had come and everything had turned to mud or cement-like mud, but it hadn't happened at the sort of peak moment of the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so there was a lot of novel new situations that happened during this. And as I said, I had come into this thinking about neurohacking, thinking about Cynefin, and in these type of situations, you see a lot of things play out. And I think I related sort of the main thing that I saw happen was that, this command and control type of situation where the organization said, you can't move, nobody can come in or out. That did cause some people to be like, you can't tell me what to do, I'm going to go, and didn't result in great things. But that was a very small number of people. Or you had Chris Rock who needed, or not, was it? Yeah, Chris Rock and Diplo, they had gigs that they had to go to. So they walked out for like 5 miles, and then somebody picked them up and like, oh, Chris Rock, yeah, I'll take you back. Because you're like 6-7 miles from the town. So it's not like you're in the US in Nevada. So it's not like you're somebody couldn't helicopter in or get people out or do anything like that. But still, for the most of us, we weren't going to do that. And we listened to what they said. And then within our camps, we used the kind of self-empoweredness of our camps to kind of create some really enjoyable activities, some incredible moments. And this is kind of what it looked like during those days. This is how people use their creativity. This is, they did create art out of the mud. There were lots of these different types of statues all over the place. And to be fair, when you're in a situation like this and you're walking to go get ice and you see that on the ground, you laugh, like, or at least I laughed. And it was one of these moments where I was like, wow, I never thought like that people would take that time and energy to do that. We did have these, so the whole point is there were, the disaster was averted. I made a snowman. Oh, good. Thank you. That's a better one. Yes, I saw other things which I could not take pictures of too. So everybody has their own experience on these different ones. There was a double rainbow. This was on Saturday, and this was, so the man that burned. So they burned this giant. That's how this whole thing started. A mud man. Yeah, exactly. We'll see a picture of it in a minute. So that's the kind of the man this year. It was on a beehive kind of structure. Every year they have a different structure. And basically that man normally burns on Saturday, but they couldn't, there was rain. They couldn't have the equipment. People couldn't get out there. You destroy the playa. So it did burn, but it burned on Monday. So people basically said the man burned. Yeah, the man base. Thanks, Rob. The man burned. And Saturday was 72 hours long. It burned on Monday night. So I think my point on this is the way the dynamics of this whole organization. One, there was a huge increase in neuroplasticity, in neuroadaptability, and there's many, many neurohacks that go on in this brand new environment. And if I comb through a lot of the literature of people's experiences and saw this kind of reference multiple times, and what looks like a rather, I don't know, to many it could look like an unorganized or chaotic situation out in the desert. When you're actually in it and you were faced with a disaster, you could kind of see like how the organization worked, how these different aspects of Cynefin worked together, how the kind of self-empowered teams took care of themselves, took care of the people around them. And it was quite a beautiful experience to be part of. And that's basically what I was hoping to share with you. I hope it, for some, it may be like, oh, well, that was interesting, but I don't know how useful it was. But I know from me, I got much deeper into Cynefin to kind of see how Cynefin could help these type of situations. And in terms of neurohacking, I know I've looked at a lot more different ways of neurohacking, having seen all these different alternative versions of it out in the desert. Any questions or any thoughts or any?
How many times did you do it, Ted? Was it one?
So I did it twice virtually, and then I did it twice in the desert version.
Oh, I'm sure the virtual does not compare.
You know, it's funny you would say that. I in most ways, 90% yes, but I actually, and I found it on YouTube. I had an experience in the virtual where there's a place called Playa Alchemy, and we were in the middle of COVID, so obviously it was an intense moment. But I'm sitting in this room, I have my headset on, and there's this gorgeous temple that they create in virtual reality. And one of their leaders of Borders Without Burners, Christian Breedlove, hollow ported, which means, normally in these virtual reality worlds, you have sort of funny stick figures and you're moving your hands if you have these different things. But when you hollow port, it's actually the person you see in a 3D, in a real kind of space. And he spoke brilliantly about how Burners Without Borders, perfect, thank you, Rob, had helped during Katrina. And he had talked about how some of the work they had done. It was really inspiring. And after that, the temple, the walls of the temple disappeared because you're in virtual space, so they can do that. And they showed this movie called Samskara, which is built. It was actually built for Burning Man, and it's a pretty trippy movie, but it was on the sky. So you're looking at the sky in a virtual space, and you're watching this movie with all these, giant dragons and giant things, and talking about, the destruction of man and things like that. And then the temple walls come back, and this very famous DJ hollow ported into the space. And it was, I have to say, I'd never imagined that experience. I never, so it was quite powerful. My wife has a video of me sort of dancing out in our little patio in the rain, laughing, of course, because it looks ridiculous, with me and my headset on. But the internal experience was quite powerful. It put me in a space where I wanted to, I had much more faith in virtual reality, because that was the most powerful experience. I get motion sickness in virtual reality, so it's hard to coach always in that space. I have to wear sort of those C-bands, and I can only do it for a certain amount of time because of the motion things. Hopefully the Apple product that they're bringing out will take care of some of those things.
Huh.
But there were many, many more experiences in the real, the immediacy and the intensity of seeing things, and the smell and the sight, and it's more, but I will say the virtual, and the interesting thing, the temple that they built the second year I went, they first built it in virtual reality, and then I actually went and saw it in reality. So they built the same temple in virtual reality, they built it in reality. And that was quite a powerful experience, to be in a building virtually beforehand and then go into it in real life. And it definitely changes the experience. You experience things quite differently than just going to a building that you've never virtually explored before.
Nice.
Any other? I'll stop sharing. Sorry.
Really, really fascinating, Ted. That was so wonderful.
Great. I appreciate it, Jeff. I appreciate the opportunity, and it was a lot of fun to do this. So I appreciate everybody making the space for this to be created and done. And it was great.
So questions for Ted?
Not really a question, just sort of observation. So I really didn't know very much about Burning Man at all until you've sort of gone through it. And I actually did a little Google while you were talking as well, because I thought, I need to know about this. But I really like the way that you sort of brought Cynefin into it all, and I can really relate to how all of those areas, quadrants, are used in that. And then also bring it back to one of your first slides, which was like the learning, sort of being motivated. I can't remember the other sections, but how those people were all there from their own choice.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And how
that was the experience. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so
definitely.
much. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and if we could have that in organizations as well, sort of give them the motivation.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
I would agree. I mean, that is a lot of people, it's not perfect by any stretch of any imagination, but there are parts of it, like when you're in it. My sister said it was one of the best weeks of her life, and she didn't have a lot of expectation going into it either. So, the proof of that, it's not just my own viewpoint, because I could, I'm an optimist, so I can always see good things in things, but even having others, and my 17-year-old son, being able to go through it with me and saying, yeah, this was an amazing experience. Those were kind of good sort of touch points for me to be able to do that. Thanks.
I love that. Fun
Yeah,
and
so it's
education.
really great. And you touched on a couple of other things as well around sort of meditation, sort of enhancing for the mind and the gut. And if you do, or your father does any more talks on that, I'd be pretty interested.
Yeah.
Transcendental meditation or something.
Yeah, transcendental meditation. That's what my dad's done. The initial research when he was at UCLA, right when I was born in 72. And then he went on to do postdoc at Harvard on it. And it was in Science and Scientific America at the time.
And I don't know if you want to brag about being that young, Ted. That's really not, not appropriate.
So was that a question to me? I wasn't sure what that.
No.
Yeah, I think.
Oh,
I
you
think,
see
I
how
think,
transcendental? Yeah.
No, I think he was just saying if we do any more, like, so Dad's written a book on gut health.
Okay, good.
Gut Crisis is the name of the book, and he's done a lot of presentations on that. But in Total Brain Coaching, we were hoping it's not just this part, the nervous system, it's also the gut, which has all these trillions of bacteria. Trillions, is that right, Dad? Is it trillions, or am I exaggerating?
No, you got
a lot either way.
Yeah.
Speaking of meditation, you guys familiar with positive intelligence?
Yep.
Yeah, because I think that brings meditation in its own way.
Yeah, it's a very
practice.
personal experience, meditation.
Yeah.
People have to find the things that resonate. Dad's done a lot of research on transcendental meditation, so that's kind of the areas that a lot of times we talk about. And but meditation in its own right is, coming back to that self. People have to find the right path for that.
Yeah. And speaking of getting out of the comfort zone, I think the challenge is, as for us Agilists, is to, rather than sending people out to Burning Man, is and then or even having virtual reality headsets they can wear in the office, even more so in a remote atmosphere, is how can you get people out of their comfort space? If they're at home, their home office, it's just so easy. I have challenges in a training environment, get people, they turn off the cameras and they're multitasking. Is, other than those couple things, what's our challenge to get people out of their comfort zone so they're then learning, say, Agile things?
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Dad, or? No, okay. Yeah, I was thinking like the way, so usually when I come in as a coach, we're asking them what they want out of the situation. And so then we kind of point out that like they're going to learn a lot faster and they're going to get these habits and these different tool sets that are going to be useful for them to solve these problems. So the faster they learn this stuff, the better it's going to be for them to handle life, like even on that level. And so that's a way that sometimes has worked. But, and then you're also just, we talk about how if you're coaching or you're scrum mastering or whatever thing you're doing now, a lot of times we're missing all that information now, just for exactly what you said, where people turn off their cameras, they multitask, all that kind of stuff. But our job is to kind of go through this. So we usually have people that are in there who will turn on their cameras. And we usually, we do everything we can to kind of get this, because this is, otherwise they're not going to learn and they are not going to change. And if then we could go help somebody else in the organization. That's usually how that conversation, but other people may have other techniques. How do other people deal with the situation that Rob was talking about?
Gentle cajoling. Repeated. It works.
Make it so interesting they can't not.
Oh yeah, that's a good call.
Yeah, I like that.
Or like you said, what's in it for them? And everybody wants faster, right? So I like the way you put it up front too, and then maybe even at the beginning say, we're going to try, we want you to get out of your comfort zone. So you just put it up front and get people to not, rather than like kind of making it happen without them knowing it. Maybe just say, we are doing this, and let's see if we can get you out of here, because you'll learn better and faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we create, as a coaching organization, we create pull products. So like people
Mhm.
want to learn about the cloud. So we have technical coaches that, and people line up for this. And so, and then we say, oh, we can only handle so many people. And so like it becomes a thing where like the only people we're going to work with are the ones who are going to actually want to learn and do these things. And that's a fun situation to be in.
Yeah.
That's a really fun situation. Oh, look at the little one. There's a lot of neuroplasticity going on in that
A lot
one.
of small agilists over here. That is so cool. I don't know if Snowden would approve of having such a positive subject to go with Cynefin, but who cares? He's not here.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cynefin he's come up with what is it called? Tides, but it's called estuarian. Like he's come up with 2 or 3 new tools for handling complexity. And he has like a 3. So Cynefin is actually the last piece of it. And he's got this I'm not saying it right, estuarian way of positive and negative attractors to create the actual environment so that your projects and your things can grow. So he's all about creating the space where there's the energy to actually make the things happen that you want to. And then he has like a second piece, like that's like Wortley maps, where you're figuring out like where you want to go and what are the milestones. And then he has this Cynefin framework now where this is in these situations you deal with that. So he's like, yeah, he's very, Dad and I have been listening to him a little bit and going back and forth on how he tells a lot more stories now because he can be so intellectually. Oh, look at the waving. That's awesome.
I understand he's doing that now. Andy Hunt was featured speaker on Scrum event last month. He was talking about Snowden.
Yeah. He can be a bit overwhelming.
Hey, Wayne never pulls out
I'm
Gumby
still
for
in the
me.
show.
Good job, Wade.
Thanks, Wayne. She's enjoying it. Say hi,
That's my agile guy. He's very flexible.
Oh,
Yeah, that works. That works.
And he smiles too.
What's the donkey's name? Okay, alrighty. For those, actually, for everyone.
Pokey.
What was it?
Pokey.
Pokey. Gumby and Pokey.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
right.
yes, that's it. Okay, thank you. Taking me back a few decades. All right. Once again, this link I'm putting on chat, this is for next month's Agile Practitioner event. And let me repeat what this is. Kemi was kind enough to go and get Pragna Nijumolu to come and speak with us. She's a young Agilist, young entrepreneur, and they say she's basically on fire. It sounds really interesting, and I hope to see you all there for that one.
You can also learn all about the new Agile Demics initiative that we have with Agile Alliance, which is helping high school and college Agilists and bringing Agile into education.
Will you be there, Em?
I will be.
Okay, that's awesome. I want to hear about that. Ted, once again, thank you so much. It was wonderful. And until next time, I look forward to seeing you all.
All right. Have a great one. Thank you guys.
Great
So
to see you, Mr. Wallace, as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.
See you, Dad. All right.
Thank you.